Dad. The plane's falling. The boy's scream tore through the quiet morning at Lake Tahoe. Garrett Lawson dropped his fishing rod, eyes locking on the sky, a private jet spiraling down, smoke bleeding into the clouds. For 6 years he'd run from everything. His past, his grief, his name. But in that instant, none of it mattered. He dove into the freezing water, lungs burning, dragging a stranger from a sinking cockpit. When she coughed back to life, her eyes, sharp, terrified, met his. "Who are you?" she gasped. Garrett didn't answer. If he had, she'd have known he once worked for the company that built her doomed plane, and lost everything because of it. By sunrise, 3 black Cadillacs rolled up his dirt road. The world was coming for him again. What they brought wasn't gratitude. It was revenge, wrapped in power and secrets. Fire subscribed to Canada's Heartfelt Tales, where true courage meets the truth no one dares to tell. Rain still clung to the pines when Garrett Lawson woke the next morning. The air was sharp, filled with the smell of wet bark and engine oil. From his kitchen window, the lake looked calm again, as if the night before had been nothing but a dream. But then came the rumble. Low, heavy, deliberate. Tires crunching over gravel. 3 black Cadillacs slid out of the trees like shadows made of steel. Wyatt was still asleep when Garrett stepped outside. He wiped his hands on his jeans, every muscle tense. The lead car door opened, and the woman he'd dragged from the lake stepped out. Alive, immaculate, except for the small bruise still darkening her temple. Meredith Carlisle, CEO of one of the largest aerospace companies in North America. "You saved my life," she said, voice firm but steady. Garrett nodded once. "You don't owe me anything." "I'm not here to owe," she replied. "I'm here to understand." The silence between them was thick, full of things unsaid. Behind her, 2 assistants waited, holding folders stamped with the Carlisle Aerospace logo. Garrett's eyes flicked toward them, then back to her. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Not in this valley." "Maybe," Meredith answered, her tone softening. "But you jumped into a burning lake to save me. Least I can do is look you in the eye." She stepped closer, close enough that Garrett could see the faint tremor in her hand, the kind only people who've seen death try to hide. "I need to know why that jet went down," she said. Garrett's jaw tightened. He knew the answer. He'd known it 6 years ago. "You don't," he said. "Trust me." That truth ruined everything it touched. Meredith's gaze hardened. "Then maybe it's time it ruined the right people." He didn't answer. But when she turned to leave, her eyes caught a set of blueprints pinned to the cabin wall through the open door. Lines, numbers, hydraulic sketches. Her breath caught. She recognized them instantly. Carlisle Aerospace schematics. His name, his handwriting. That was the moment she understood. This man wasn't a stranger. He was a ghost from her company's buried past. Later that day, Garrett sat by Wyatt's bed, the boy tracing airplane wings with his finger on a model they'd built together. "Dad, that lady, she looked scared," Wyatt said. "She's got reasons," Garrett replied. "So do you," the boy murmured. Garrett didn't respond. He couldn't. Because the truth was a wound that still bled every time he thought about Brooke. His wife, gone because of the same company that now stood on his doorstep asking for answers. The next days blurred. Reporters swarmed the valley. Drones buzzed overhead. Someone had leaked a video. Garrett diving into the flames, pulling Meredith out. But instead of celebrating him, they twisted it. Headlines screamed. Reclusive mechanic saves billionaire in suspicious crash. Questions became accusations. How could a man with no digital footprint just happen to be there? Why did he disappear afterward? When Garrett went into town for groceries, whispers followed him like shadows. "That's him," someone muttered near the counter. "The one from the video." He set his basket down and walked out without a word. At home, Wyatt asked quietly, "Dad, why do they hate us for helping?" Garrett looked at him for a long time. "Because, son, some people hate what they don't understand. And they don't understand men like us." That night the storm came. Wind howled against the windows, shaking the old cabin like it wanted inside. Garrett was repairing a lantern when Wyatt's voice cut through the roar. "Dad, my chest." The boy was gasping, pale, his small body trembling. Garrett grabbed the inhaler, pressed it to his lips. "Nothing." "Me." Panic hit like lightning. He tore through drawers, boxes, the spare was gone. Then headlights flashed through the rain. Car screeched to a stop outside. "Meredith." She burst through the door, rain-soaked, breathless. "Get in," she said. Garrett didn't ask how she knew. He just carried Wyatt into the car. She drove through the storm like the road belonged to her. Windshield wipers slashed the darkness. "Stay with me, kid," she whispered. "Stay with me." At the hospital, doctors rushed in. Machines beeped. Nurses swarmed. Garrett's hand shook so hard he could barely let go of his son. Meredith stood beside him, drenched, silent, steady. When the doctor finally said the words, "He's stable," Garrett sat down and broke, shoulders shaking in a quiet room that smelled of antiseptic and hope. Meredith didn't speak. She just handed him a towel and whispered, "You don't have to fight alone anymore." The next morning, Garrett gave her a small metal USB drive. "Everything I saved," he said. "Emails, reports, proof they ignored the danger 6 years ago." Meredith held it in her palm like it was a live grenade. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you're the only one left who can do something about it." That night, in her San Francisco office, Meredith opened the files. Line after line of warnings. Red flags. Ignored messages. And at the bottom of every report, one signature. Philip Carlyle. Her uncle. The man who had taught her how to survive in a world ruled by power and silence. Her hands trembled. She realized the man who saved her life was the same man her company had destroyed to protect a lie. She printed everything. Locked it in a folder. Then a voice came from behind her. "Working late again." Philip stood at the door, calm, smiling. "You've been digging, haven't you?" "I'm finding the truth," she said. He stepped closer. "The truth won't save you, Meredith. It never does." She met his eyes. "Maybe not. But it'll save others." Days later, in a small rented conference room, Garrett and Meredith sat across from a forensic engineer. The woman scrolled through the files, her face growing pale. "These are damning," she said. "If this goes public, Carlyle Aerospace is finished." "Then let it be finished," Garrett said quietly. Meredith's eyes glistened. "No," she whispered. "Let it be rebuilt." She stood up, her decision carved in stone. "I'll take it to the board myself." The boardroom felt colder than any courtroom. The walls were glass, the city below glinting like broken mirrors. Meredith walked in with the USB and connected it to the screen. Emails appeared. Time-stamped, undeniable. Hydraulic failure risk. Immediate action required. Philip's voice broke through the stunned silence. "Turn that off." "No," Meredith said. She clicked to the next slide. "Bury this. Production continues." His own words. Executives rose from their seats. Lawyers whispered. Some walked out. The empire cracked right there, in that sunlit tower. Philip's mask slipped. "You think this makes you righteous? You're destroying everything your father built." Meredith's voice didn't shake. "You destroyed it the day you chose money over lives." He slammed his hand against the table. "You'll regret this." She looked him dead in the eye. "No, you will." The footage went viral within hours. Headlines changed from hero or hoax to CEO exposes family cover-up. The world finally saw the truth. Garrett watched from his cabin, the lake reflecting the morning sun. Wyatt sat beside him, building another model airplane. "Dad," he said softly, "you look different." Garrett smiled faintly. "Maybe I finally stopped running." But justice wasn't finished yet. Philip Carlyle was arrested 2 weeks later. Fraud. Negligence. Obstruction. The cameras flashed as he was led away in handcuffs, the same man who once threatened to destroy Garrett's life with a single phone call. Meredith stood outside the courthouse, her statement simple. No family, no fortune, no legacy stands above the truth. Reporters shouted questions. She walked past them, eyes lifted toward the sky, the same sky that had once nearly killed her. Months passed. The world moved on. Carlisle Aerospace became the Carlisle Safety Foundation. The headquarters was smaller, built of wood and glass, open to light. Garrett stood beside Meredith at the grand opening. She spoke to the crowd. Engineers, families, whistleblowers once silenced. One man warned us, she said. We didn't listen. We paid in lives. Today we listen. Applause filled the hall. Cameras clicked. Garrett caught Wyatt's proud smile in the front row and felt something he hadn't in years, peace. After the ceremony, Meredith joined him by the lake again. You know, she said, I used to think power meant control. Now I think it means trust. Garrett looked out at the water. And forgiveness, he added. Maybe, she said. But forgiveness doesn't erase what we did. No, he replied. But it lets us build something better. That evening, as the sun melted into the lake, 3 Cadillacs appeared again. But this time without tinted windows or bodyguards. Only Meredith driving, carrying a folder and a smile that didn't hide behind business. Inside was an offer, consultant, head of safety, full authority, no overrides. Garrett stared at the words, silent. You're serious. I'm done with secrets, she said. Help me make sure no one dies for silence again. Wyatt tugged his father's sleeve. Dad, you should. You fix things. Maybe it's time you fix people too. Garrett exhaled. All right. The next morning the headlines told a new story. Whistleblower hired to lead safety reform. But none of that mattered to Garrett as much as the sight of his son running barefoot across the dock, laughter spilling into the open air. The same lake that once took everything from him now shimmered with life. For the first time in 6 years, he smiled without weight. And somewhere behind him, Meredith's voice carried across the wind. You pulled me from the lake, Garrett. Now I'm pulling you back into the world. He turned, met her eyes and said quietly, Then maybe we're finally even. She shook her head. Not yet. Not until every truth like ours sees the light. The breeze shifted. The water caught fire in gold. The world felt still, not empty but full. Because sometimes, the greatest rescue isn't from drowning. It's from silence. The seasons turned quietly over Lake Tahoe. Snow melted into silver threads feeding the water where everything had once begun. Garrett stood on the dock at dawn, coffee in hand, watching Wyatt launch a small wooden plane into the air. It wobbled, then caught the breeze and soared higher than either of them expected. Meredith's voice echoed faintly from the porch. Looks like it finally flies straight. Garrett smiled. Sometimes it just needs time, and someone who believes it still can. There was no triumphal music, no headline waiting to crown him a hero. Only the steady rhythm of a man who had learned that doing what's right doesn't erase pain, but it rebuilds purpose. The world hadn't changed overnight. But inside that cabin something had. The silence was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. When the morning light touched the water, it glimmered like truth finally seen after too long in the dark. Garrett whispered to himself, maybe courage isn't about saving others. Maybe it's about refusing to stay silent. The plane circled once, then drifted down, landing softly beside his boots. Garrett picked it up and laughed, a quiet, honest sound that belonged to the living. Sparkles, if this story moved you, let it travel further. Like, share, and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales, where every voice that dares to speak the truth helps the world rise a little higher.